Welcome back to Made Up of Wires. We're decompiling Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I have a little bit of a problem in the back, and I'm going to try to resolve that as best as possible. We can do that on the stream. I'll tell you what was happening and what's failing, and we should be able to get through it pretty quickly. If you're not familiar with the Castlevania Symphony of the Night decompilation project, you can go to soten.z.dev, where you'll find information about the overlays that we've decompiled so far. An overlay is, you could think of it as one of the files that are on the disk. They get loaded into memory at a specific location, and they overlay everything that was previously there. I'd say we're through about a quarter of the overlays, maybe a little bit less for the US version of the game, but you can see the status and the things that we've done and the progress that we've made there. You'll find a link to Discord and a link to GitHub as well, where you can learn more about the project. I'm just a contributor to the project. I stream, I help with decompilation and tooling and other things like that, and that's what I'm going to keep doing today. If you are familiar with the game, if you're familiar with Unix-like tools, C, and a little bit of MIPS. You don't have to be super familiar with MIPS to get started, but maybe assembly language in general. You might be a great addition to the project as well. I was looking at it a little bit before. There's only about 24 MIPS instructions that are really used in this game on the original PlayStation. And they are compiled with an optimizing compiler, so how they get put together isn't always straightforward, but you learn 26 letters of the alphabet. Certainly you can learn 24 MIPS instructions. So let me review what we were doing last week a little bit, and then talk about what is going to be going on today. So last week we were looking at the long library. There's a extension to the library that's up above where the master librarian is, and you can get to it out of logic with a strategically timed jump kick, which I was amazingly able to do on stream. It I think is a 1 in 20 chance that I make that jump. There's two areas that you can get to out of logic. Logic being you don't have the progression items yet that are intended for that area. So in the case of the long library, you definitely, to get to one of them, you definitely should have Power of Mist, and then possibly a double jump or lightning boost. I guess double jump would get you there as well. Double jump would probably be fine to get you back out. If you go in without one of those two abilities, you will get soft locked in that area if you go too far. And there's a mini boss there called Lesser Demon that you can fight, and you do get a relic. I can't remember which one offhand. We played it the other day, but what I wanted to find was the section of code at the end of that overlay, and all of the functions related to that overlay were behavior of entities that were in that one section. So we found a pretty nice trove of functions, kind of all sorted into one section of the overlay. And so I think we're going to look at that a little bit. But I broke something over the weekend, and so I think I'm going to focus on that first and try to get back to that, and then we can go back to the long library. So we're going through and trying to we're trying to beat the game, or decompile the game, in somewhat of a logical order, and that requires going through, a walkthrough or something like that, but then looking at the bosses and the stages that are being decompiled. And so one of the bosses in the long library is Doppelgänger 10. There's two different Doppelgängers in Castlevania Symphony of the Night. 10 and I believe 40 is the other one. The number specifying the level that those enemies are at. And so I thought I would import Doppelgänger 10 boss over the weekend. And I have so there's a couple things that happen when you import a stage. First, you create new C files for that. A boss and a stage are really no different in terms of the type of overlay that you're importing. So when you import it, we have tools primarily written by Xianimo and updated by several others on the team that go through and will create the configuration, the splat configuration necessary for just a relatively generic compilation that will give you a matching file at the end. And then there's some other pattern matching and things that humans have to do to get that kind of organized. And once that's done, people can start decompiling. So I was working on importing Doppelgänger 10, and then I had left it where I was splitting up a bunch of files, and I have a compile error. I'm going to walk through what's causing this compile error and how to fix it. So in this case, I have a bunch of symbols, well, specifically assembly files that are trying to be imported, but they can't be because there's no such file or directory. And let me open the file that's trying to import these. This will be in a file called ecollect. Ecollect is the name that we give to files that functions that are related to collecting items. And I believe that collect dummy may be the end of that, but it could be later. So we've broken these up into shared files that all of the stages or bosses use. And along the way, we also have this RO data. RO data is read-only data. It could be strings. So if you look at something like this, is a string here, some text in between quotes. This won't be put into RO data because reasons that I won't go into right now, but things like that would show up in RO data. The big thing that we have in RO data on this project is jump tables, which are switch statements which get compiled into a very efficient table. And so when the compiler is figuring out how to jump to different cases in that switch, it will do the logic to quickly branch to any one case and decide what the index is into that table, go to that table to find what memory address to jump to, and then jump to that address. That table gets put into read-only memory, or read-only data, sorry. Read-only data being one of 4 sections which each overlay contains. So as I was going through this, in parallel there is this splat configuration. And this tells us where the offset for the final compiled binary is in each of the C files that we want. And so I've been splitting these, and pretty much you can go through and figure out what functions belong to each split. And this is just a convention that we use, E being entity related, ST being stage related. We have some generic ones, creating entities, collisions, and things like that. So we've broken those up based on just what we've seen patterns in other stages. And like I said, a boss is a stage. And so that's what we're looking at here. Hey, Mr. MIDI, good to have you back. So as I was going through this, unfortunately, as you're breaking these things up, you have to pay attention to where, when importing RO data, especially, not so much regular data, where those splits happen. And I ignored this particular RO data import. And our section order is first we have data, then we have RO data, which is here. Then we have text, which is code. And then BSS and SBSS, there's really no difference. They're marked as different. BSS is uninitialized data. SBSS is small uninitialized data. What is small uninitialized data? I've never seen anything pulled out that's small after BSS, so I don't think that it's used by GCC of this vintage. At least not for compiling to PlayStation overlays. So when I was splitting these up, I was completely ignoring RO data for the most part. And so I need to rectify that and get RO data split back, or split to match what's here. So I have everything starting at this B41C offset that I need to make sure is coming along with this eCollect file and getting compiled into the same object. So I'm going to look in the assembly directory boss bo4, specifically looking at data, and I'm going to cheat a little bit and grab the offset from here. The offset is going to be the same as this address, which the label is given that same address in its name, minus 801.8.0.0.0, 0, one more 0. And so you could do that math in your head probably, but I like to mix up numbers in my brain, and so I don't always trust myself. So I'm going to add a new RO data section, and I'm going to call it eCollect. And now when Splat extracts this, it's going to extract it to the place that is expected. Right now, the last C file I have split is blitchar. Blitchar actually is just one C function and no RO data or anything else. But I haven't split any further. Basically, I just go through each section and just pull it down into the next segment and kind of pare down as I go. But right now, blitchar has this RO data in it. It won't eventually, but for now, I need to split that. Actually, maybe I'll just split it now, and get these into the correct place. If nothing else, I can do the split into just an unknown kind of anonymous file, or a file that's given the name of the next function being entity relic orb. And to do that, I'm going to grab this address, which will be in right now it'll be in blitchar's directory. Grab the offset here, and like I said, I'm just going to make a new file. Because I don't give this a name, it will be given the name of the offset. So I'll just call that 3CAA0.c, and that will get linked in the correct place. And I shouldn't have closed blitchar along the way. So I'm going to grab everything after the blitchar function. Blitchar does what you think it does. Maybe most people don't don't think about blitting or characters, but it writes a character to the screen. So I'm going to paste all of those other functions here, add and include for bo4.h. This is a common header for the boss, where the stage just named the same thing as the overlay. These includes now all have blitchar in them, because that's where the previous segment split was. So that all needs to be renamed to 3CAA0. And then I also need to make sure that RO data starting here at 4248 is also pulling from that, which should be 34248. And I think that should be enough. Let me... Yeah, I think that should be good. So I'm going to do an extract and a make. Extract looks at that splat configuration file and then tries to read it. So first thing is a missing file for 3.4BFO. This is the same problem as the others. I've not specified this as a RO data segment, so I need to fix this one as well. So at 4168, there is also a RO data needed. And this is actually before red door. And I may have to do these as well, ones that are just in US. I'm not sure yet. So some of the RO data may not be necessarily associated with a file like the jump tables are. So let's try that. All of this just requires a little bit of debugging along the way. Oh, no US C.O file, that's right. I did not, I got rid, that was the original name of the file. So I'm going to call this RO data without the dot in front of it. And so that tells Splat, don't look for this in a C file, just go grab it from the assembly. And we can figure out where or what that data is, and that might be the best thing to do to make sure that it is being imported into the correct place. Occasionally, it may be hard to tell, but jump tables always are associated with another function. And so these are associated with 3F or 3.4BF0 as well. So we can move this up here. What I need to see then is if we need to import those as well. There's 3 jump tables that they should get split along with the functions. And so I'm going to hope that that's what happens. They should appear as a header along with the functions. And unfortunately that didn't happen. There are undefined references there. So let's look at that as well. We may need to include that RO data then. So I'll look at ASM US boss VO4. This should show up in non-matching 3.4 VFO. There should be a couple. There's only this one, 4168. others I would expect to have their jump tables. I may clean and try to build again, just in case there's some state that's preventing these from being extracted for some reason. I also could just import this directly. I don't like that idea, but that would be an option as well. Let's try that just to see what might happen. I think this would work. No. Yeah, because I need the .ro data, and I don't think that's going to be valid. And now it's already defined. Okay, so I'm gonna clean and try that again. And while that is going on, let me look at where the library stuff was. We can start working on one of those functions. So this is towards the back, I believe, of the library. And what was that file named? I have this in a different branch. Oh. So that built in, yeah, it worked. Great. So that's all working now. So I'm going to get all this committed. And then go back to the long library. I haven't looked to see what else may have been done here. And it looks like my local branch has a bunch of conflicts. I have so much stuff that, that I just have on the side. So let's look here at first C file. And if there's anything that needs to... So I had split some of these at some point. I'm going to abort this. And I'll deal with reconciling that later. And where is that? I made some notes about where this was, and I've lost them. I've lost my notes. Didn't I have this? Yes. Let me look at that splat config for library. It might have been in this unknown 4918. Yes, okay. Unfortunately, I'd gone through all of these were in this area. I think I even have the 801 CF918 function decompiled. 304 we started on last week. That one wasn't quite finished. No, nobody has worked on 918 yet. So let's start at the top. 918, I believe, is the grate that only Mist can use to pass through. That gives us some additional information that we may be able to name some enums or some status flags based on that. There is some Mist passable walls in outer wall as well. I don't remember if that has been decompiled, but let me start here, and then we can see if there's any matches there. Actually, we could look at the duplicates report as well, but I'm going to copy this first, and then we'll do it. I have a copy of the duplicates report I ran last night. You can also get it from GitHub in the wiki. There's a link to the duplicates report. And so I want to look for unknown 4F918. 4F918. So specifically looking for that 918 function. Oh, and there it is. And so we have this already. So we know that this is the Mist door. So we can just add the symbol here. We don't need to name that as well. It looks like, so N01, oh, that's why. So it is the same implementation as N01. So we should be able to share the Mist door implementation there. I'm going to open the symbol table. That's not what I wanted. I want symbols, not splat. I mentioned last week as well that I had submitted a change to splat to do two things. One was expose splat config as an API, as well as add hierarchical support for splat config. The exposing, I think there's still some work to do on the design of hierarchical support. Splat already supports merging, but it requires that you know everything that you want to merge beforehand, whereas this kind of baked that merging in as part of your splat config modeling. So I need to follow up on that part, but I think the config as an API is going to go in, and I have to break those things out. But that'll be really nice. Then we can basically rely on splat config for a lot of the other tooling. I guess it's nice if you like splat config. If you don't like splat config, then maybe it's a boo. Okay, so we know that function now. And let's look at N01 and see if that was So here's our miss could pass text. Interestingly, this is not I have nothing to do with this wall. I wonder why this is not just a string. SOTN strings are a little different. In this case, it looks like it is using ASCII. There are cases where that's not true. These are null terminated, so really just adding escape characters for the 4 remaining should be fine. So we have a utility called SOTN string, because there are some 0 indexed strings as well that are not ASCII. But we're able to store them as ASCII string and then through a pre-processing step pull those out. So the other thing is that this is it's not shared, so it will take some work to pull this into a shared function. Whenever you have common code like this that uses a lot of external functions, each of those has to be mapped to an address individually for each stage, and that's not something that I want to get into right now. But we do have an implementation, so I'm not going to work on that. Let's look at this next one, which is FA00. Nobody has worked on that one yet. And I'll look at that as well in the dupes report and see if that is a duplicate of anything. And it does not look like it, so this is new. So I know some of the like Fleaman armor and other things like that were in this list. So we'll start a new scratch for the PlayStation. And I have not looked at this. I will try to see if anybody has written anything which calls this, just to see if it turns out to be an entity or something else. If it's an entity update function, then we know the signature. Otherwise, we're going to have to figure out the signature. Should be good. It does look like it probably is an entity update function. Need to be better about middle clicking and not destroying my update buffer. Not very many entities here. But yes, it is an entity update function. Oops. It is in the list of entity update functions. Which allows us to provide a signature for decompilation. So we have a few things that we need to figure out along the way. Signatures for each of these functions. When we have symbol names already, the likelihood of having a signature is pretty high. It's quite interesting that sen is pulling in. I thought sen was completely decompiled, but it is pulling in. Oh, it's possible that that is for the PSP. So let's grab a function signature from here. Kind of a gnarly one. And I put that into the context when I think about it, because then I can get a new decompile. Make entity from ID. That's the next one I'll look for. And that does what you think it might do. Grab unknown collision function 2. That may take a collider, it may take something else. It takes a position. And then I'm going to run N2C again and see if it can figure out the other ones. And it looks like it did. Some of these I may or may not go through and add signatures to. You don't necessarily know beforehand whether or not the signature was available in the original version. So if the types look wrong, then I will grab that up. Save. I'm going to reload this page because I'm not getting the correct UI. There we go. So we have some array, and we're grabbing an item from a particular index in that array. And the offsets are 8 bytes at a time. I'm going to assume that this is a 0.32 because we have velocity x coming from the first field, and then 4 bytes later, velocity y. These are part of the same array. This is going to cause some match issues in M2C, but or in our match over on the right side, because the symbols will diverge since we know they're part of the same thing. But that shouldn't be too bad. So I'm going to update that type. I'll throw that into the context. The other type, the other one that's missing is actually not a unique thing. So I'm going to fix that reference. So here we're taking this and taking the x value, same as here, and then down here it's the same array, but we're taking the y value. All right, 2 more errors, actually 3 more, but one of them is this. And then we'll be compiling and we'll see how close we are. SP20 should be a collider, and it is. M2C didn't write that correctly. It should be looking just at the effects field of that struct. Same as here. And collider effects 1 is, I believe, that it hit something. So 86% match off the bat. That's not too bad. I'm going to go through and go top to bottom, just cleaning things up along the way, getting rid of casts that seem unnecessary, variables that seem unnecessary. Not really paying attention to how close the match is yet, just cleaning things up, and then I'll I'll focus more on getting a match. And if you are watching and want to know any details about any of the changes that I'm making, please post in chat. Here we have a self plus BC. BC is the size of an entity. So this is really just self plus 1. This is another case where M2C puts the wrong offset. A lot of times when calculating offsets like that, it chooses the literal value rather than the correct value for pointer arithmetic. One thing I see kind of coming down, a lot of these state machine switch statements often are the main function, and usually there's nothing else after them. So if you break out of that switch statement, you're going to fall to the end and then return, and that's the case here. So when I see returns that don't have any other logic, or like a default case like this, I'm just going to change those to a break, because that's going to do the same thing. And it reduces the number of returns. I don't mind multiple returns, and actually prefer that for things like exception handling and error handling. However, my preference usually is to break out of a switch and then implicitly return, rather than bake the return into the switch. So there are some other things up here related to these values and this logic and illegal here. I'm going to skip those for now and then come back to those as other things get worked out. This temp v0, that seems fine for now. I want to see what is jumping to this block 52. So in block 52, we're taking bar v0, which is the value of the v0 register, which up here has been assigned to 4, and we're assigning it to step. And when we see the other use case for block 52, it probably is also assigning bar v0 underscore 3 to something. And so usually we can, here a break isn't even necessary. Usually we can just copy the same logic. Here we will have to break, but we're just setting this to 2. Actually, the break here might not even be necessary, because I could make this an else and then implicitly break below. I'm not sure if I care either way. I don't know if one is nicer than the other. They should compile to the same thing. It's possible that if we looked at the PSP version of the game, we might see an advantage to one way over the other. We definitely would not see those variables that are just being used to set the step later. So I can get rid of this one here as well now. And then get rid of the label. There's one more go-to down here. I'm going to keep going down and deal with it as I see it. I don't think I saw any other GAPI functions. GAPI functions like this, they are always struct access, but we put those symbols in to make them easy to find. Here we have kind of a similar thing. The A0 register is being used to play a sound effect. Almost always, those are two unique calls, and the sound effect is used inline. And we could look at what those sound effects are, and those would probably help us identify what entity we're looking at here. So let's do that. I believe it was Serpounce, and possibly Derp Princess. A lot of work has gone into naming all of these. So some of these names, I believe, may have come from the Saturn version, which has a sound test screen. But they may have come from somewhere else as well. But this is hugely helpful to have names for all of these. FEDCBA. So this is a hard stomp. I don't think I have these macros in here. I do. And then 649. So that was A, hard stomp D. This is kind of an odd let me get back to where that was. So the way that here, so we're reading velocity x. No, this one is this down here. We're reading velocity y, storing the value of a comparison off into a temporary variable, and then using that temporary variable down here. I think that is just a compiler optimization. So my guess is that this is checking for velocity y less than 0. So we're going down, and if velocity y is greater or equal to this FFF. This I might check. I'm going to back that out. And it's a little more technical than I want to just replace. Because if it does end up being wrong, then it'll be a little trickier to, at least for me, to remember that, this would be greater than hex 1000. And not only was it better, but it matched completely now. We get rid of all these extra superfluous variables. The same thing is probably happening up here as well, but I'll go back and look at that in a little bit. Thank you, Dig Down Deep. Appreciate it. I need my chat. So I will back that out and show you what was going on here. We have these temporary variables, and one of them is storing the result of a integer comparison, and then that integer comparison is being used to check against 0. The comparisons in C are always result in a 0 or a 1. In this case, we can do that check in line like we'd expect, and then it looks like a normal if statement. We have another sound effect, C68. Now I'm gonna try to keep this where I can see it. Good evening, Dig Down Deep. Good to have you. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Bone throw. I wonder if that's the axe. So I'm assuming that this is Fleaman jumping and then swinging his axe. But terrible, terrible mod. Kind of like GAPI. Entropy gravity well. We've been a thing for 4 months. Oh, I should send you a card. I appreciate you showing up. Appreciate anybody subscribing. Too soon. Not ready to commit. So this, the result of allocate entity will be an entity ID. So I think I will make it that. I thought you already had wedding planning that you were in the middle of. I don't want to make anybody jealous. All right, one more go to. So if both of these conditions are true, we're going to fall down into this. So let's look at what the $80 is. So this is square. My little brother has been going out with his girlfriend for, I believe, 8 years. And we're wondering when he's going to propose. He has a good job now and should be pretty self-sufficient. We don't know what he's waiting for. My wife and I got married. I think we had dated for just over a year before I proposed. We got married about 3 months later. So we don't get the whole waiting thing. Oh my goodness. Freak here. Can she pick up her arm? That's a nice yeah, that was quick. We've been married this summer it'll be 20 years. So 20 years, that's crazy. Crazy to think about. All right, so if we're pressing square and params is 0, we're doing gpads 0. This is an array. So we're going to set params to 1, and we're going to look for pad circle. Is this... I assume that this was Fleaman related. Is there some kind of trick with the flea man where you can square circle and have something happen? All right, so I think I can just make this an else there, and then fall through. Get rid of the go-to. I need to break otherwise. So this is some funny logic, and I want to see if so if step equals 8, 3, 4, 2, 9, 0. And let's see if there's a plus plus, or plus equals 1. No. All right, so we're at about 89%, just with the first pass of cleanup. Not the best, not the worst. Oh, I called this entity ID, but it's actually allocating an entity. So this is a pointer. I want to rename that to just entity. So we're coming through here, allocating the entity. This is actually doing the allocation. When an allocation is done in Soten, it's actually just looking up a free slot in a table, usually. It's not like malloc. So it's going through each of these entities. I do need to subtract here. So that is 2a plus 224 is 266. So I believe this is 266. No, I let's get these wrong, and I don't know why. I feel like my math is correct. But there's something I'm missing. It actually helped quite a bit. So here we have a loop. I'm going to go through and now start fixing up some of these things. SP20, I'll rename Collider. Temp v0 underscore 5, that one could be entity as well. I don't think I've ever talked about sports on this channel before. I'm not the hugest football fan, but I always do like making terrible for you food, junk food for the Super Bowl. And yesterday was no exception. And we definitely ate well. Wings that were awesome. Potato skins. My wife made the spinach and artichoke dip, which was incredible. I'm not making it. So I think these may be coming out of order. There we go. Surprisingly, M2C decompiled this correctly. Usually it will pull this out into a variable and then do a single assignment. So nice to see that. This looks out of order. I was looking at Splat over the weekend, and I also was looking at Spim disassemb, SPIM, Spim, and then disasm is the GitHub project. So both of those things are. This is the same reference to 256. Splat uses Spim to do the decompilation, and Spim is what generates all the assembly that we look at and upload to decomp.me. And one of the things that it is amazing at, and is trickier than you might think, is finding these global values and putting them into the assembly, pulling them out as symbols, and then putting them back in. If you look at like what is happening here, if we take something like this load and add these two instructions, when you're loading a 32-bit address in MIPS, you can only do it 16 bits at a time, so you need two instructions. The exception is for jumps, jump and links. You get 24 bits there, and the amount of memory in the PlayStation allows that to be enough room for any function in the address space. But other addresses, you have to do 16 bits at a time. So we have two instructions, and so Spim has to come through, identify that these two instructions are both loading to different 16-bit areas of the same register. When it gives these the same symbol, it puts high and low in front of them, but they come as two independent numbers. And basically Spim is keeping track of all the instructions and saying, who's the last person to write to register S4? When we come and write to register S4, we're going to load possibly the bottom half. So this one loaded the upper half, upper immediate. This one is just doing an add immediate. So as long as that value is 16 bits, which this is, it's not going to affect the upper 16 bits that were just loaded here. So when all of those things happen, does the resulting value look like a global address? If it does, then do we have a name for that already? Otherwise, generate a name for it. So a pretty complex set of logic. But it also takes a long time. For the DRA binary, it takes about 15 seconds on my i7, which is quite a bit of time. So I was looking at, can we make this faster? I curse Python because it just seems like a slow, non-optimizable language. All right, so I'm coming back through now and looking at some of the places where the instructions are off. line 63 here. So this is one of those cases where this has been pulled out into a variable. What's more likely the case is this, where velocity x is being set in both sides of this. And yeah. Before the ad, anybody in chat make anything good for the Super Bowl? Do you guys eat a lot of junk food? Have a party? Play Soten? My son sat in the back and played Overwatch the whole time. The only thing that I don't like about that is he was doing it without me. Yeah, what's the Super Bowl? You know, the thing that Americans put the highest priority on in sports when the entire rest of the world says, what? That's not football. It's staggering how America just does not, just ignores international sports almost completely. I don't really care one way or the other, but kind of a crazy thing. I think this might end up being a ternary. So we need to figure out what is causing this M2C error. Occasionally it will be instructions that might be part of macros or otherwise wouldn't be normal instructions, but I don't really see anything here. We have store words, so loading things to the stack, loading immediate values. I'm not sure what M2C was having an issue with. So argument 3 is 0, we have that. So the first 4 args, if I'm not mistaken, are the ones that are on in registers, and then the remaining ones are on the stack. So I'm going to look at another instance of this function and see what types of things are being passed to it. Just integers, nothing too crazy. There is, it looks like there's a ternary at the end here, so I will do that. I'm not, like I said, I'm not the hugest football fan. I do like college football a little better than professional football. And the teams I like in professional football are terrible, and they have been for decades, and will continue to be for decades. I'm just going to put, so I know 3 is one of the, or it appears that 3 is one of the immediate values, and maybe 16. But there is some more going on here. I also think that I can get rid of this. But there is, yeah, something else going. I'm probably gonna have to pull the PSP version to figure out what's going on there. So like American football, not that big of a deal to me. But I know a bad game when a bad game was on. That was an awful game, and advertisers spent a lot of money for an awful game. Like it was, the first 3 quarters were just a complete blowout. Not even like fun. Regardless of what team you want to root for, is just a terrible game. This var v0 3. This was contributing to the step 4, and I think there was a second instance of it earlier, but it doesn't seem necessary. Sometimes that happens with branches. MIPS has something called a branch delay slot, where the instruction immediately after a branch always gets executed. So this branch is going to go down to offset 270 here. But this load immediate of 4 into register V0 always happens regardless if the branch succeeds or fails. Thank you. Take down deep. Hey, Canoria? One of those two. The blue on my on my interface makes it too hard to read, and when I highlight your name, it's a gray background and it makes it even harder to read. And I'm losing my nearsighted vision, so apologies for the mispronunciation. So I'm going to keep going down. Here's another case where velocity x is being set, and it should be being set on either side of this condition, with the positive one happening first. These are fixed values. I've talked about fixed values before. In the mid-90s, it was not obvious that floating point was going to be what everybody used. Floating point was slow. So the PlayStation uses fixed point values. And then Soten comes and uses a different format for fixed point values. I'm going to take a small amount of credit for Soten decomp. I do think there are at least half a dozen people, I think, have come through the stream and contributed, and there's been quite rapid progress being made in the last 6 months or so. The other, obviously, doing a stream about it is not going to be all of it, because the project is set up in a way that made it, I was able to contribute almost right away without having a lot of experience in this space at all. So a lot of the tooling, I'd say in April or so of last year, was just in this like sweet spot of being very friendly for people to come on. The community's really good and helpful. And so, yeah, over the last, I'd say 6 months especially, a lot of new people have come in. Some have fallen off, some have continued on, but a lot of really good contributions have been made. And the tooling then has gotten even better. Zynamo did a lot of work on imports. I think as we were going through weapons, especially, we had just more and more code that we could rely on as we're figuring out the meaning of different globals. Every little bit makes everything else faster. And so we've gone to being able to decompile a stage it still takes about a month, but much, much quicker than it had been. We can look at that real quickly. Like the looking at something like Richter, so we have progress back from early 2023, and it finishing in around November. Most of it was done by July, but about 18 months, and Dracula even longer. Center stage was probably where I started doing most of my early stage work. Pretty similar. Don't look at Abandoned Mine, because Abandoned Mine was like just an overnight drop. Like, hey, here's Abandoned Mine. So, I mean, a lot of these just took a long time. It was a handful of people. Now I think the contributor list is probably about double regular contributors. I pulled all of the contributors a couple weeks ago, and I think it's less than 50. But really, I mean, there's about a dozen or so that are regular contributors that have done a lot, and then people who have done a handful. But a lot of those have come through just recently in the last 6 months or so. Library, so that's one that we are currently working on. But going that quickly is just really crazy. All of these that have just but slow progress over the course of multiple years. Now we know most things, and so we're able to get these done in like a month, which is awesome. And there's a lot more tooling that we can do to make this go even faster. So really exciting. All right, so 114. This is another one of these where it will be part of this. One of the other big things, now that I think about it, and shouldn't be understated, is over the summer, the PSP went from being something that, yes, like was part of the project, and you could grab binaries from, but there really wasn't tooling for that either. So if you were going to use the PSP, you had to do a lot of upfront work, and not a lot of those symbols were mapped either. And now the PSP is as easy to grab overlays and import those as anything else, and the code is much easier to decompile. So having both the PS1 and PSP at the same time helps it go really fast. So we have an interesting mask issue here. I think what I'm going to do is just do this based on velocity x and then do a shift equals. And move this down. Usually these are opposite. That looks right. 2 versions of the PSP. Oh, yes. There, right. So there's one called HD bin, and what it seems like is it was a initial debug version of the game that what did I screwed something up along the way. Anyway, and it's the Japanese PS1 version. Is it square? No, that's not it. The Japanese PS1 version. Oh, where's my? But path references are updated to load files off a hard drive instead of loading them from a CD-ROM. And what do I call it? Oh, wiki/wiki/. So so what's interesting about that HD version, hard drive version, so it has these files that came directly from the JP 1.0 version. It has subsequently shipped on the PS4 as well in the Android and iOS versions. I haven't yet figured out where a bunch of these overlays are in those versions, but it's likely in those as well. So up until this point, as far as I know, nobody's done anything to get it to actually be a playable version of the game, but most of the overlays are identical to the JP 1.0 version. So while it is a PSP version, it isn't changed considerably, and still compiled with GCC using the PlayStation toolchain. I think I may leave this here today. I'm out of time for now. I'll come back and look at this a little more tomorrow. So I'm not sure exactly what function or what entity that we're looking at here. I'll set up a playthrough as well. I know what section of the long library this is in. It's mostly just trying to separate these breakpoints from the other things. And the room that that triggers these, I guess outside the room I can get to armored fleamen, which I think this is related to. We'll take a look at it a little more then. So that's all I'm gonna do for today. So we were working on decompiling Symphony of the Night. And yeah, there is a lot of progress. If you want to be part of the progress, come join us on Discord. Go to soten.z.dev. You can find a link to GitHub there, and you'll see the progress that we've made on several of the overlays. There are still lots of work to do, and still mysteries that we haven't solved. So come join us on this journey if you think it'll be interesting. I'll be back tomorrow at noon Pacific. Noon Pacific? No, 11 a.m. Pacific. I'm not in Pacific time. But where I am, we don't do time zones. So I don't want to confuse other people. I'll be back tomorrow though, and we'll do some more decompilation. I'll see if I can finish this offline and we get something new, and maybe identify what this is. That's it. That's all I have for you. Adios. Hey, we need cheering. I definitely appreciate the cheering. I want to say I do appreciate everybody who shows up in chat. Dig Down Deep, Attribute Gravity Well, Mr. Midi, Canoriath. Really like having everybody here. This is the most enjoyable part of, I think, doing the streams, is interacting with people who enjoy the tech, enjoy Soten. I'll see you all tomorrow. Adios.